Hi, it's Future from Sewmate. Welcome to my channel. If you want to see how I make this colorful women's shirt, please stay tuned. If you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, please do, and turn on the notification bell so that each time I upload new videos, you'll get a notification. So now let's get started. You will need a basic shirt block pattern to do this. I'll leave a link in the description below and a link above as well for you to go make yourself one, and then you come and join me in this tutorial. So we're going to start with the back. Trace around your block as usual, making sure to mark all the notches. Lift your pattern. So that's our center back. We're going to extend our hemline by 5 centimeters at the center back. Go 15 centimeters in and put a mark. Now with your curved ruler, draw a nice curve for our shirt, like I'm doing here. Make sure it's squared at the hip line. Now I'm putting in the hem allowance, which is 2 centimeters. We're going to be adding a 2 centimeter box split at the center back. So come to the center back and draw a line which is 2 centimeters wide, like I'm doing here. Square across like I'm doing, and square at the top as well. Now adding notches to the pattern. And labeling the pattern, shirt back, cut one on fold, and I put my initial. So the center back will be on fold. Now I'm adding my grain line for the pattern, which is parallel to our center back. Cut around your pattern. Our back pattern is finished. Now we're moving on to making the front. Trace around your block as usual, making sure to mark all the notches. Extend your center front by 5 centimeters, like we did with the back. Go 15 centimeters in again from the center front and put a mark. Now draw in your hemline curve for the shirt, like we did with the back. Now I'm going to add a button extension of 1.5 centimeters after the center front line there, like I'm doing now. So 1.5 centimeters, draw a line. Then I'm putting in my facing. The facing is always twice the button extension. So my button extension was 1.5 centimeters and the facing is going to be 3 centimeters. Draw a line like I've done. From the facing, we're going to add our interfacing section. This will have a width which is 2 millimeters less than the facing extension. So my facing extension was 3 centimeters minus 2 millimeters. It will be 2.8 centimeters. So button extension 1.5 centimeters, facing 3 centimeters, which is twice button extension, and then we have the interfacing section, which is facing minus 2 millimeters, so 2.8 centimeters for me. Now I'm just continuing the straight line at the bottom there and cutting along the interfacing line. Next, we're going to fold our placket the way it's supposed to be when it's sewn. So starting with the interfacing section, we're going to fold along like I'm doing there. And then we'll fold along the pattern extension, which is our new center front now. So this is how it will look from the inside. Now square a straight line to the edge there. Now cut along the neckline to get a nice shaping for our placket. Straighten up your pattern. Now I'm adding the hem allowance, which is 2 centimeters. And adding notches all through the pattern. Just extending the lines to the bottom there. And adding notches. And labeling the pattern. Shade front. Cut 1 pair and I put my initial. And I'm adding my grain line, which is parallel to the center front. And cutting around the pattern. And our front pattern is finished. Now we're going to use all the other components we made for our shirt series. Now moving on to sewing our shirt. So what you need are your completed patterns, your fabric. I'm going to be using this multicolored satin fabric, and I'll also be using my usual cutting tools. Okay, so now let's start cutting our fabrics. Our pattern pieces are all cut and ready to sew. So the first step is for us to interface the cuffs and the collar patterns. Okay, let's do that. Okay, now so I finished interfacing my cuff and collar pieces. We're gonna put the cuffs on the side for now. So now get your upper collar and your under collar. Put them right sides together and pin along the top edge here. Now take this to your sewing machine and sew along this edge here with a 0.6 centimeter seam allowance. Let's do that. So we finished sewing our top edge seam. So now we're going to understitch our collar. Get your under collar and roll it on top of the seam allowance here like this. And then we're going to go and do an understitching right through the whole seam. Let's do that. Okay, so understitching is done. I don't know if you can see it clearly there. Now fold your collar back so that they're facing each other right sides together like this, making sure to put the seam allowance exactly where it wants to go, which is towards the under collar. And now we're going to pin along the sides here. Now we're going to take this to the sewing machine and we're going to sew along these edges here with a 0.6 centimeter seam allowance. Let's do that. Okay, so now we're going to turn this collar to the right side. Take this to your iron and iron it nice and flat. Okay, so I ironed my collar nice and flat. So now we're going to be sandwiching our collar between the two collar stands. So get the raw edge of your collar here and we're going to align with the notches that we have here on the collar stand, okay? And pin along the edge. Now take the other collar stand, we're going to put it on top here, matching all the notches as well, and pin along. So now take this to your sewing machine and sew along the whole edge here, okay, up to there. Let's do that. Okay, so that's done. So next we're going to turn our collar to the right side. And we're going to press it into position. Let's do that. Okay, so our collar is nice and flat now. So next we're going to move on to assembling our bodies. Take both your front shirt pieces and go to your iron and iron the button placket down the right way I showed you when I was doing the pattern making. Let's do that for both. So I folded and ironed under the button plackets. So now we're gonna go to the sewing machine and do an edge stitching along this edge here up to the top for both the front pieces. And whilst we're there, so now get your back piece and we're going to align our notches to form the box split that we have at the back. So just bring both notches to the middle notch here. And we're going to take it to the sewing machine and tack down the pleat here with a 0.5 centimeter seam allowance. Let's do that. Okay, so that's all done. Plackets sewn and nicely ironed. And also the back piece, I've tacked down the box split at the back and just ironed it as well. Now get your back and front shirt pieces and lay them right sides together and just make sure to match the shoulders and pin them along. So now we're going to take this to the sewing machine and sew along the shoulder seams and overlock them open, okay? We'll do that now. Okay, so the shoulder seams are nicely sewn and well pressed, okay? And I overlocked them open. Now we're going to attach our collar next. Now with our shirt right side up, we're going to pin the back of our collar to the right side of the shirt, matching all the notches. Let's do that. So now we're going to take this to the sewing machine and sew from one end to another with a 0.6 centimeter seam allowance, just on one layer of the collar, the under collar. Okay, let's do that. Okay, so we finished with that. We sewn our collar on, and I also went ahead and ironed the collar nicely, and I made sure to iron the seam allowance here upwards so that we'll be able to cover it in the end. So next, what we're going to do, go to our iron again, and we're going to iron under our seam allowance, which is 6 millimeters, right round, making sure that we are really covering everything in like this. Okay, let's do that. Okay, so I ironed my seam allowance down like I told you, and it's nice and flat. So just make sure that you cover everything in between, and you can also do with pinning everything down so that it will be easier for you to do an edge stitching when you get to your sewing machine. So now go to your sewing machine and just do an edge stitching from one end to the other. Let's do that. Okay, now so our collar is done nice and neat. Okay, so now we're going to start on with the sleeves. Okay, so we finished assembling our collar and it's looking nice and neat. Now with your sleeves wrong side up, just locate the notch you put at the bottom here for the split, and I've got an owl punch on mine here to show me where the split is gonna end. So I'm just gonna draw a straight line using my chalk from the notch to the owl punch. So this is going to be our split line. Do the same on the other one. Next, we're going to outline our seam line around this line. So I use seam allowances of 1 centimeter. So I'm just gonna do that now. Now take this to your sewing machine and just sew along the seam line here. Just follow the outer edges for both sleeves. Let's do that. Okay, so I've done that. So now what we're going to do is to cut through our split line. Take your scissors and cut through this line, leave about 1.5 centimeters, and then we're gonna cut through to the corners. Make sure not to cut the stitches, okay? So now lay your sleeve with the wrong side up. So what you're going to do, get your under placket piece and lay it on top of the sleeve with the right side down like this. Make sure to align the edges here for the shorter side of the split. Okay, now pin along the edge. We'll take this to the sewing machine and just make sure to stitch with a 1 centimeter seam allowance until we get to the bottom notch here, okay, which shows the end of our split. Let's go and do that to both sleeves. So we've sewn on our under placket to one side of the split line like this. So the next thing we're gonna do is to just roll our under placket over like this and just make sure to iron it nice and straight here. When you finish with that, turn your sleeve to the right side, and what we're going to do next is to grab the under placket piece again, and we're going to iron under 1 centimeter. Okay, iron your 1 centimeter seam allowance under like this. Okay, let's do that. Okay, so I finished ironing both my sleeve plackets. What we're going to do is to sandwich this raw edge with the under placket. So we're just going to turn it over on top of the stitching here, okay? And we're going to give it a top stitching about 0.2, 0.3 millimeters will do for both until we get to the end of the split here for both sleeves. Let's do that. Okay, so I've done that to both plackets. So this is what we have. I don't know if you can see clearly. That's the nice stitching in and out. With your sleeve wrong side up, just hold your under placket and flip it over on top of the sleeve and just get hold of the bottom part of it and bring it to the front like this. Now align it with the little triangle we have here, and we're going to go pin it on, and then we're gonna go and give it a stitching right on top of the other stitching that we put last time here. Okay, so that's done, and now the lower part of our under placket and the little triangle are sitting on the right side of our sleeve, okay, on the right side now. Now take your placket pieces. So what we're going to do is to fold back along the fold line here, and we're going to pin along the edge up to the notch that we put there for the end of our sleeve split. So do this for both the plackets. Okay, so this is a bit difficult to explain using the fabric because you can't see clearly. So what we're going to do with our folded piece of placket, so we'll start stitching from here to here, then we turn our fabric up to there and we turn our fabric again and we'll end on this notch. Okay, so here, here, up to here. Let's do that for both our placket pieces. Okay, so I've done that. I've sewn from this point to this point to this point and back to the notch that we put here. Okay, so what we need to do next is just to turn this little piece to the right side. Make sure to get the corners out nicely. So now I'm gonna take both to the iron and just iron them nice and flat. At the same time, we're going to iron the seam allowance in like this. That's 1 centimeter seam allowance for both. Let's do that. So I finished ironing my plackets and I ironed the seam allowances under like this. Okay, it will make the sewing easier. Lay your sleeve on the wrong side and we're going to get our placket piece. Align the right side of your placket to the wrong side of your sleeve, making sure to match the edges and just pin along this edge. So up to this notch here that signifies the end of our split. So now we're gonna take this to the sewing machine and just sew with our 1 centimeter seam allowance to the end of the split there. Let's do that. Okay, so we've sewn the placket on. So now we're gonna go to the right side of our sleeve again. And we're going to bring our placket to the top side. Make sure to get everything in there and just cover that seam line there. Pin along the edge. Now get your placket piece and lay it on top of the under placket like you would when the sleeve is finished, making sure to cover the lower part here. Now pin along and make sure to mark where your notch is, which signifies the end of your split. So mine is around here. I'm just gonna put double pins there so that I know where my split is ending. Okay, just pin everything down. So this is what we're gonna do when we go to the sewing machine. We're sewing along this edge, this edge, this edge, this edge to the double pins where we have our end of split, and then we're gonna go across straight to the other end and then we stop. So we're going this way, following through all the edges up to the double pins, which marks the end of our split here. Then we go straight across to this point, and that's where we're stopping. Let's do that for both sleeves. Okay, so that's done and it looks nice and neat. Now we're going to fold the pleats for our sleeve. Make sure you're folding them towards the placket. So get the second notch, align it to the first notch and pin it down. Get the second notch again, align it to the first notch and pin it down again. Now we're gonna go to the sewing machine and just stitch along here so that we can hold the pleats down with a 5mm seam allowance, okay, for both sleeves. Okay, so both our plackets are finished and I also went ahead and gave them a press. Now they're nice and flat. Now get your shirt. With your shirt right side up, get your sleeve, make sure to get the right one and then just pin it along the armhole, making sure to align all the notches. Now take this to your sewing machine and sew along the armholes and make sure to overlock them as well for both sides. Okay, so we've sewn on our sleeves. Now we're going to finish off our side seam and the sleeve at the same time. Next, we're going to align our side seams right sides together like this. At the same time, folding our sleeve back, right sides together as well. So now we're going to pin along from the sleeve all the way down to the hemline. Let's do that, making sure to match our underarm seam, okay? So now take this to your sewing machine and sew along this edge here from the sleeve to the hemline with a 1.5 centimeter seam allowance. When you finish that, make sure to overlock the whole edge for both sides, okay? Whilst we're there, we're going to hem our shirt as well. So just do a double folded hem, which is 1 centimeter wide. I'm just gonna do that now. Okay, so the side seams are nicely sewn and overlocked, and I also went ahead and finished off my hem there. It's looking nice and neat. So next we're going to finish off our sleeves. We're going to attach the cuffs. Grab your cuff and we're going to start aligning the interfaced side, right sides together with the sleeve edge, making sure to leave your seam allowance out like this and pin along the edge for both. So now we're going to take this to our sewing machine and just sew from one end to the other with a 1 centimeter seam allowance for both sleeves. Let's do that. Okay, so I've sewn on the cuffs. Make sure that you iron your seam allowances upwards so that by the end of all this, it will be sandwiched in between the cuff, okay? So next, grab your cuff again and fold it in half backwards like this so that right side faces each other. Make sure you go past the seam line here with your seam allowance, which is 1 centimeter for me like this, and then pin along the sides for both sides. Now take this to your sewing machine and sew along the sides here with a 1 centimeter seam allowance, and make sure to stop where your extended seam allowance is, okay? Don't sew your seam allowance at the bottom here. Let's do that for both sleeves. Okay, we've done that. So now we're just going to trim the seams a little bit so that we don't have too much bulk in there. Now we're coming to the inside of our sleeve, and we're going to make sure that we cover this seam allowance here with the bottom part of our sleeve. So we're going to fold the seam allowance under like this, and make sure you go past this seam here by about 2 to 3 millimeters and just fold along the whole edge, pinning along it as you go. Now we're going to take this to our sewing machine and we're going to be stitching from the right side. We'll be stitching in the ditch at the same time catching the back here. Let's do that for both sleeves. Okay, so I finished sewing my cuffs and I went ahead and ironed them as well, looking nice and neat. So the next thing I'm going to do is to add buttons and buttonholes to my shirt. So the only thing you need to remember is that for women, it's right over left, which means our buttons will be on the left side and our buttonholes on the right side. Then when it comes to sleeves, the button will be on the undercuff in the buttonhole on the upper cuff. Okay, so I'm just gonna go and do that off camera, and I'll come and show you the results. Okay, so I finished sewing on the buttonholes and the buttons, as you can see. So buttons and buttonholes all looking nice and neat, and our shirt is finished and I'm happy with the outcome. Thank you.